Auguste Dupin is a strange and interesting fellow. He is the last heir of a once wealthy, renowned family. Yet for Dupin, he needed little to be happy, just life's basics and his beloved books. Dupin and the narrator first met while searching for the same rare, little-known book in an old bookstore. A chance meeting turned into another encounter at the same store. Then again in another bookstore. Eventually, they began to talk. The narrator became fascinated by Dupin's family history and amazed by the breadth of his knowledge. More than that, Dupin's brilliant mind felt like a light illuminating the narrator's soul. The narrator thought that having such a friend would be an invaluable treasure. He suggested Dupin come live with him. Dupin agreed to live with him, bringing the joy of shared books and the comfort of companionship to ease the narrator's loneliness. They spent their days reading, writing, and talking. Dupin loved the night, and under the stars they would walk the streets of Paris, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, always lost in thought. The narrator noticed Dupin's exceptional reasoning. Dupin claimed he could see into people's souls and surprised the narrator by revealing secrets he thought only he knew. One night, as they walked down a long, dirty street in Paris, both were lost in their thoughts, silent for 15 minutes.
You're right. He is a very little fellow, and I bet he'll be more successful in lighter and less serious ways.
Oh, yeah. There can be no doubt of that. Wait, Dupin, this is beyond my understanding. How could you know that I was thinking of?
You mean, how did I know you were thinking of Chantilly? Why did you stop? Well, I thought that it's because you know that Chantilly is just way too small for the place he acts.
That is indeed what I was thinking of. In heaven's name, tell me, if better there is, by which you have been able to see into my soul in this matter.
It was the fruit seller.
Fruit seller? I don't know fruit seller.
I mean the man who ran into you as we entered the street. It was 10 or 15 minutes ago, perhaps less.
That's it, that is...
Let me explain. Listen closely now.
The fruit seller who bumped into you made you think of Chantley, Dupin said, leaving the narrator puzzled at how he knew. Dupin explained his thought process. From fruit seller to the cobblestone to stereotomy, to Epicurus, to Orion, and then to Chantley. The fruit seller's bump made the narrator step on uneven stones, sparking irritation and thoughts that lingered on the cobblestones. As they walked to a street with newly cut stones, Dupin noticed the narrator's face brighten, and his lips formed the word stereotomy, which they recently learned. Dupin connected stereotomy to Epicurus, the ancient Greek who theorized that everything is made of atoms. Their recent talk about Epicurus and the cosmos led him to predict the narrator would look up at the sky, notice the stars of Orion, and think of its name. Dupin linked Orion to Chantley, recalling a harsh article they read about the actor, and noticed the narrator's smile at the connection. Noticing the narrator straighten up, Dupin guessed he was thinking of Chantley's small stature, and commented that lighter roles might suit the actor better. The narrator was astonished. Dupin had perfectly traced his thoughts. One morning, Dupin showcased his reasoning once again on the murder of an old woman, a case that left the police helpless. But Dupin knew what to do. He seemed like two people, one coldly assembling, and another just as coldly dismantling. They read the news of a terrible killing. An old woman and her daughter lived alone in an old house on Rue Morgue, were murdered in the middle of the night. On the streets of Paris in the dead of night, the neighbors were awakened by terrifying screams and gathered in front of the house on Rue Morgue. Neighbors and the police worked together to break open the door and enter the house. Inside the house, the neighbors and police conducted a thorough search, finding every room empty. The door to the fourth-floor room was firmly shut, with the key inserted on the inside. Upon entering the room, the neighbors and police were met with a bloody and chaotic scene. The furniture was damaged, and gold coins, earrings, and clothing were scattered across the floor. Long, grayish-white hair was spread out in front of the fireplace. On the floor, 4 gold coins, an earring, some silver items, and 2 bags filled with gold coins were scattered. The police found a box under the bedspread, containing only a few old letters and some documents. The body of the daughter was found in the fireplace, her body stuffed into the chimney. Behind the building, the body of the elderly woman was found, her neck nearly severed. The newspaper headline detailed the murder case of Rue Morgue. Neighbors and the laundress described their impressions of the mother and daughter and their living conditions. Shopkeeper Pierre Moreau explained to the police that Madame L'Espagne has been buying food at his shop for nearly 4 years. The banker spoke about Madame L'Espagne making large deposits and withdrawals of gold coins. The police described hearing 2 voices, one high-pitched and shrill, the other low and soft. Spanish resident Garcia talked about entering the house but not going upstairs. Dupin and the narrator were reading reports about the Rue Morgue murder case in the study. Dupin suggested that they investigate the crime scene in person. The two went to the house on Rue Morgue to recreate the scene of the crime. After hearing the woman scream, the neighbors and police hurriedly ran toward the house on Rumor Street. They forcibly opened the door and found the room in disarray, with damaged furniture and bloodstains on the floor. The police examined the scene near the fireplace in the house on Rumor Street. Long, grayish-white hair was scattered around the room, stained with blood. When Dupin and the narrator arrived at the house on Rumor Street in the evening, they found a crowd still gathered around the house. Dupin and the narrator walked towards the house on Rumor Street, preparing to investigate the murder scene. They were ready to uncover the truth of the murder case. Dupin and the narrator walked up to the 4th-floor room where the 2 women had been murdered. Dupin stood at the door, attempting to unravel the mystery of how the killer entered or exited the room. The room had overturned furniture, scattered items, and bloodstains on the floor. Dupin carefully observed every detail of the room, while the narrator tried to understand the truth behind the crime. 4 gold coins, an earring, silver items, and 2 bags filled with large amounts of gold coins were still scattered on the floor. Dupin and the narrator entered the room where they discovered the daughter and the old woman's bodies. Dupin focused on examining the bruises on the daughter's neck and the deep finger marks. He continued to inspect above the fireplace. Dupin carefully examined the head wounds of the old woman. He continued studying the bloodstains left on the floor and the window the killer might have used to escape. Dupin and the narrator carefully examined the scattered gold coins, letters, and silver items inside the house on Rumor Street. Dupin and the narrator analyzed the strange sounds in the murder case inside the study. The next morning, Dupin walked into the narrator's room and suddenly asked him if he had noticed anything particularly strange at the murder scene. Dupin pointed to key details, emphasizing that the sound the neighbors heard was not the voice of the murdered woman, and explained his theory that the old woman could not have killed her daughter and then committed suicide. The narrator stared at Dupin in surprise, while Dupin, with his back to the narrator, gazed out the door. Then Dupin thoughtfully turned toward the wall. The narrator spoke about the strange sounds heard in the Rumor Street murder case. 4 men from Italy, England, Spain, and France attempted to describe the strange foreign sounds they heard in the Rumor Street murder case. The narrator questioned Dupin, exploring the unusual forces and mysterious sounds in the murder case. Dupin turned around and stared firmly at the dark-haired narrator, stating his reasonings and findings. Dupin and the narrator returned to the house on Rue Morgue once again. Dupin points to the window in the room where the murder occurred on Rue Morgue and explains how the killer escaped. Dupin points to the first window and emphasizes a nail that is securing the window. Dupin crouches down and carefully inspects the second window. In particular, the lower half of the second window is blocked by the bed. The narrator suggests to Dupin, "Perhaps if you remove the nail." Dupin pulls out the first nail with force. Dupin attempts to lift the first window, but it remains firmly closed. Dupin discovers a hidden button and, when pressed, unlocks the internal mechanism. He easily lifts the window. The narrator says, "So, the killer couldn't have escaped through this window." Dupin carefully examines the second window and successfully lifts it. Dupin carefully places the nail back into the window frame and explains how the window is closed from the outside and automatically locks. Dupin explains how the nail on the second window functions. The killer arrived at the house on Rue Morgue on a hot summer night, Dupin mutters to himself, while the narrator observes him. Dupin looks directly at the narrator, his eyes flashing with determination. Dupin continues discussing the case with the narrator in the room where the murder occurred on Rue Morgue. Dupin points to the windows in the room where the murder took place on Rue Morgue and explains their structure. Dupin says, "When we first arrived at the house on Rue Morgue, I noticed a long metal rod extending from the top of the building down to the ground, a lightning rod. The room at Rue Morgue, the scene of the brutal murder, is in chaos, with clothes scattered around and the purse untouched. There are great hairs in front of the fireplace, which were torn from the old woman's head." Dupin is analyzing the scene in the room of the Rue Morgue murder, emphasizing the hair and bloodstains scattered on the walls. The old woman's head was nearly severed. A knife couldn't have been used to decapitate her. Dupin and the narrator continued to discuss the case in the room. They concluded that it was a force stronger than a human, a savagery greater than human, and that it was a murder without reason. Dupin shows the hair he found on the old woman's finger to the narrator. The narrator says that these hair are not human. Dupin draws a comparison on paper, Dupin shows the marks on the daughter's neck, which do not match human fingers. The doctor says the marks were caused by fingers. Dupin believes these marks were made by the hand of an orangutan, those humanoid creatures living in the wild forests. The narrator tries to encircle the block of wood with his fingers as though it were the woman's neck. Dupin is nearly certain they were caused by an orangutan's hand. Dupin has the narrator read a book that shows pictures of orangutans. There are two voices, one from the orangutan and another from a Frenchman. It might have been an animal. It might have been a strong man from the circus. It might have been a sailor. The Frenchman's voice exclaimed, "My God!" in fear. A newspaper reported the capture of an orangutan, and the orangutan's owner was a sailor. Dupin speculates that the sailor might have taken the orangutan back, hiding it until the trouble passed. Dupin opened the front door of the house. The visitor didn't ring the doorbell. He walked up the stairs, then stopped. The narrator and Dupin hear him go back down the stairs. The narrator tells Dupin they hear the stranger going up the stairs again. This time, he did not turn around, but came directly to the door of their room. Dupin said in a firm, eager voice, "Come in, my friend, come in." Dupin and the narrator talking in a dimly lit study. Dupin concludes that the killer's owner is a sailor. A tall sailor holding a wooden club enters through the door. The sailor sits in a chair and talks to Dupin for the first time. Dupin asks the French sailor to prove that he owns the orangutan. At the same time, Dupin mentions that he also wants to keep the orangutan. A tense scene occurs where the blonde-haired Dupin locks the door and places a gun on the table. The French sailor, pale-faced, holds a trembling wooden club, showing his fear and anxiety. The sailor begins to recount his story in the jungles of Borneo. The sailor and his companions capturing a giant orangutan in a dense tropical jungle. A wounded orangutan is locked in a cage in the ship's cabin, while the sailor watches nearby. A tense scene where the orangutan escapes from a room holding a knife, with the sailor chasing after it. At midnight on a Paris street, the orangutan runs with a knife, the sailor pursuing closely behind. The orangutan climbs up to a window of a building on Rue Morgue. The silhouette of the orangutan is visible in the faint window light. The sailor stands in the street looking up with a mix of terror and determination. An elderly woman and a young woman inside the room, their backs to the window, focused on papers on the table. A tense scene where the orangutan grabs the elderly woman's hair while holding a knife threateningly. The young woman cowers on the ground as the orangutan turns toward her, its eyes blazing with rage. The orangutan grabs the young woman by the neck. The room descends into chaos as the orangutan rampages, breaking furniture and tearing curtains. The sailor witnesses the chaos in the room from outside the window. The orangutan places the blonde woman's body above the fireplace. The orangutan throws the elderly woman's body out of the window. The sailor quickly climbs down a pole to escape the scene. The police prefect stands with his arms crossed, looking displeased, while Dupin sits calmly in a chair, appearing composed. The narrator quietly listens as Dupin explains his analysis to the police prefect. The blonde-haired Dupin responds to the police prefect in a relaxed manner. Dupin looks firm and composed, while the sailor shows a relieved expression, grateful for Dupin's understanding. Dupin writes down the case deductions at his desk, detailing the orangutan's furious expression and the glint of the knife. The streets of Paris are peaceful again during the day, with pedestrians coming and going.